So we just got done recording a podcast on Ric Flair's last match, where we talked about, uh, the history of Ric Flair's career, and obviously the Four Horsemen came up, and Logan had this great idea that he wanted to make a tier list of all the members of the Four Horsemen, all the important ones.
Yep.
I think we have some missing here, but that's all right. They don't matter. They would be in the zero tier, or it says D. It's supposed to be a zero. Let me just change that real quick. Zero. All right. So if you're in the zero tier, you are ass.
Yeah, you're terrible.
Terrible.
You don't deserve to hold up four fingers.
You should not be in the Four Horsemen. And up top here at the 4 is if you are the cream of the crop, you're the very best. You are the Four Horsemen personified goat status. And then in between is where the bread is buttered here. Who does Logan think is like in the 3 tier, the 2 tier? So this is Logan's tier list.
Yeah.
The Four Horsemen are, correct me if I'm wrong, they're your favorite faction of all time.
Oh yes.
I believe so. I knew that. So it'll be very interesting to see. You see here at the bottom we have a whole list of characters here. We got Lex here.
I mean, if you wanna start at Rick and kind of work down, so that way people can just a brief little. We've got Rick Flair. We've got Sting, Tully Blanchard, Chris Benoit, Barry Windham, Dean Malenko, David Flair, Paul Roma, James J. Dillon, Lex Luger,
Jeff Jarrett.
Oh, it's a Jeff Jarrett. Kurt Hennig.
the pictures kind of got cut off. We did this in a hurry.
Arn Anderson. Ole Anderson. Brian Pillman. Sid Vicious. And Steve Mongo McMichael. I got concerned because the Jeff Jarrett kind of looked like Barry Windham at one point in his career. And I was trying to quickly see who we missed. But if anyone is deep into Horseman lore, yes, I know that the Yamasaki Corporation's not up here. I mean, if you want to get, try and get haha about this, I know Fortune's not up here. I know Ric Flair said Fortune was the Horseman. I know the Pinnacle's not up here. Tully Blanchard pretty much called them the New Horsemen. Those are for later videos. This is the Four Horsemen. If you were to do an NWO tier list, would you include the LWO? No. This is the Horsemen.
We'd include the BWO though.
I mean, shout out to Boomini. But I guess we have to start with Ric Flair, right?
I think we're
the man of the hour.
Where does Ric Flair line up?
Obviously, he is 4. He is one of. No, he's actually. I'm trying to think with Horseman groups. He's one of 2 people for Four Horsemen that have been in every incarnation. And with that, I think we've got to put Arn Anderson up at 4 with Ric Flair as well. I mean, Rick and Arn, they go hand in hand with the Horsemen. I don't think I really need to touch too much on what Rick means to him, but look at what Arn. Arn was the enforcer. Arn was always Rick's second in command. Later on in WCW, when Chris Benoit and Kurt Hennig joined the group, he kind of gave them his spot as the enforcer. Benoit metaphorically. Kurt Hennig, he actually gave him his spot. And I mean, look at AEW now. When Arn first came out with Cody and Cody had his little group, everyone on the internet thought it would be a Four Horsemen. They thought Cody, MJF, and FTR. Next, I think, we're looking here. We see Sting in the bottom left there. I think this could surprise some people. We're going to put Sting at 2.
Sting at 2.
Now that this isn't a wrestler tier list. Remember that. This is a Four Horsemen. and Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Ole Anderson, they kicked Sting out of the group pretty fast. He wanted a title shot at Ric Flair, and that's just not how you play the game. You don't fight the hand that feeds you, as Arn said. Sting was there for a cup of coffee, maybe a month. I mean, people still remember him for being a horseman, though. It's one of those strange anomalies. He was barely in it, but he's still associated with it. If you want, pick the next one. Pick the next victim.
Let's do Barry. Let's do the good old Barry Windham here.
Barry Windham, he gets a 4.
He's a 4.
He's a 4. He was in multiple incarnations of the group. He was always seen. I mean, for current fans, he's kind of the young lion, if you will. But he was always the most athletic. Besides Rick, he is one of my favorites. Not only in the Horseman, but as a wrestler. Barry Windham, tag team competitor, television champion, heavyweight champion. There's not much he hasn't done. And I mean, he always seemed to come back and either be with the Horseman or feud with them. And in late 99, it was he and Kurt Hennig. And because, as they said, who better to beat the Horseman than the Horseman?
Let's where do you have good old Lex here, staring at you? Look at him. Look at those eyes.
I know. I've talked a lot of shit about Lex Luger. I think it's crazy that he is called a Horseman at StarCast. I've never really been a fan of the guy, but he's a tier 3.
Whoa. I thought he was. I don't know if you saw me. I was hovering between 1 and 0. I thought that's where he's gonna end up. He surprised me there.
Yeah, Luger. He started as an associate member. Then they slowly started to leave Ole Anderson, an original member, out of the group. Once Ole was out, that's when Lex came in. That's a lot of people don't realize this, but Luger actually came before Barry Windham. A lot of people kind of just assume Barry Windham came into the fold, but actually Barry turned on Luger, and it was kind of a double turn there. That's when Barry became the Horseman. Luger started feuding with him. Luger didn't come back to the Horseman like Barry Windham did. But I mean, at the time, they groomed Luger. Luger looked the part. He was the muscle that the group needed. You had all these talkers. They were in good shape, but they weren't in that great shape. That is what Luger brought to the fold. He was actually only kicked out because JJ cost him that U.S. title, and then that's what led to him teaming with Barry Windham to feud with the Horsemen, until Barry turned on him as they were going for the NWA tag titles at Clash of Champions 1. There's a lot of history with Luger, and I always found it amazing as a kid that both Luger and Sting were in the Four Horsemen, but at separate times, considering the history that those two always had with each other.
Let's move on to Sid, because I always confuse Lex and Sid in my head for some reason, even though I know that I'm a lifelong wrestling fan, but in my head I interchange these two a lot for some reason. Where do you put good old Sid Vicious, who has half the brain that you do?
So I've got Sid Vicious at a 2.
A 2.
A 2. I mean, it's one of those things, you never really associate him with the Horsemen. He was kind of one of those they just threw in to fill out the group. So the story goes that when the Horsemen first started, obviously they wanted a team together. Then, Luger was introduced, and although they had pushback, they were alright with it. They wanted to bring Sting into the fold. Sid Vicious was the first corporate appointed horseman. This is around the time that Turner and the powers that be really started screwing with the horsemen. We'll hear about it later on. In my opinion, and I know you can't not have corporate in wrestling, but I think that's what ultimately killed the Four Horsemen, because while teams like the NWO were on the rise in the late 90s, they kind of just used the horsemen as jobbers. Which, I mean, at the time, you had Flair, Malenko, and Benoit, who are regarded as three of the better wrestlers. Not only in WCW, but ever. So I don't see how you can just have them continuously lose. But with Sid being the first corporate appointed, I'm not going to put him at a 1 or a 0. Because, again, just being that backbone, there's the image that I see of Flair, Arn, Sid, and Barry. And that's just synonymous with the Horsemen. I think he could almost put any big, dumb shit brute in there in Sid's place, and it would still work.
David Flair. I think he's...
David Flair. So before the purists get angry,
Already typing.
Yeah, why is David on the tier list?
The only list he should be on. I'm not gonna.
I mean, he was never officially a member, but he wrestled with the group. He tagged with the group. I mean, he wore the damn merchandise. He was a horseman. But also, in that same respect, he's a 0.
Whoa. Polar opposites for father and son here.
Yeah, I mean, career-wise, too.
Yeah, obviously.
David Flair's biggest claim to fame in WWE was getting his ass beat in the bathroom by The Undertaker.
That's literally the only thing I remember of him, too.
I mean, as you can see by that picture, he won the U.S. title. I mean, it was late 90s WCW, so it really didn't matter too much, but he won it.
Let's move on. Who should we do? Let's do our good friend Brian Pillman. He's not. We don't know him. But.
We've got Junior opening up the show for us.
Yeah.
Thanks again for that. I mean, I've got Mr. Pillman I've got him at the 3.
The 3.
And a controversial spot. I mean, I talked about why I didn't think Sting should be higher because he wasn't in the group that long. Pillman wasn't in the group that long. But Pillman helped jumpstart that late 90s Horseman renaissance. For those that don't know, Pillman and Anderson were teaming up. Teased that they were going to do a Horseman. They're feuding with Sting, as every Horseman group seems to do, even the ones he was in. Ric Flair said he'd team with Sting, and being the dirtiest player in the game, he turned on Sting in that match. And from there, the late 90s Horsemen were born. Brian Pillman, that's where he started his loose cannon gimmick. A gimmick that I think worked well. It's kind of sad to think about that at one point, Pillman and Benoit were both the 2 younger Horseman members. They were looked at as the future of the sport. And if that was in 97, no, that would have been 95. So less than 15 years later, neither of them would be around anymore. I think if Brian Pillman would have been given the right push and the Horsemen were looked at better at that time and didn't have the injuries, he'd be regarded higher on the list. But still, just being that cannon fodder for that beginning late 90s Horseman is enough to get him number 3 on this tier list.
Now you said his name earlier. Where do we put our boy Chris Benoit?
So
friend of the channel, check out the Complete Tragedy of Chris Benoit on Spotify and YouTube, or wherever your podcast.
He's a 4.
He's a 4. Chris Benoit. Up there with the
So
greats.
hear me out. Hear me out. Again, this is a Horseman tier list. This isn't a what you did to your wife tier list. This isn't a this isn't a Father of the Year tier list. This is a Horseman tier list. And the one constant in late 90s Horseman was Benoit and his hard-hitting action. He looked like a horseman. He talked like a horseman. He wrestled like a horseman. I think, obviously, the original Horseman, if you had to create supergroups, would be Group 1. I think Benoit would be leading the second group. So if you already had Flair, Arn, Ole, and Tully, and I think you've got Chris leading that next group with Barry, Pillman, and you could pretty much throw anyone else in, because, I mean, with those three, what do you have to lose? I mean, and he had quite possibly the most famous feud of the Horsemen besides facing the NWO when Kevin Sullivan booked his own divorce.
Yep, we've already gone over that one in some detail.
Doesn't end well.
Does not end well.
But Benoit's spot on our tier list, that does end well.
Let's move on, because I'm tired of this guy looking at me. Steve McMichael. Where does good old Steve McMichael land?
I'm giving him a 1.
A 1.
He's not as bad as David Flair, but in my mind, my opinion, as a Four Horseman, you have to be able to work in the ring. Like, to be a top. That's why I said Sid Vicious was the first corporate appointed one, because obviously can't work. Mongo came in at a time when they were trying to incorporate athletes. I don't know who did it first. I don't know if WWE Florence Taylor. I mean, I know at one point Walter Payton even helped The Undertaker out. Fun little odd bit of trivia. But in WCW, Mongo and Kevin Green came in together. Kevin Green, of course, the former Panther, Steeler. He was on multiple different teams. But the great linebacker passed away within the past few years. Mongo, the great defensive lineman from the 85 Bears. And he was given a spot in the Four Horsemen. I don't know if this was like a corporate appointed one or if this is one Rick wanted. I can't imagine too much he'd want it unless Mongo was put in for the notoriety. But I mean, WCW is in the South, so why would you have someone from the Chicago Bears in your Southern group? You're telling me you couldn't get... I mean, at the time, I'm pretty sure Kevin Green was a Carolina Panther. The only thing I could think is because Kevin Green still played, he couldn't stay longer.
Right.
But, I mean, I think they made the wrong choice there. He had a couple... I mean, he was Goldberg's first big win at a pay-per-view as a Horseman. His wife left him for Jeff Jarrett. And there's not a lot that he did as a Horseman. I kind of wish... So there's this great segment where Ric Flair came back. They reintroduced the Horsemen. It was Rick, Arn, Chris, Malenko. Mongo being there kind of adds a sore spot to it. I mean, nothing against Mongo. Great guy. He's going through some stuff right now. He's just not a Horseman. Ric Flair will make you think so, but I do not think so.
J.J. Dillon.
So I've got JJ. He's a 4.
JJ's a 4.
He's the one. He was the glue for the original group. He brought them all together. He was the brains. He was NWA's answer to Bobby Heenan. I mean, even in the same aspect, he'd get in the ring, he'd take a couple bumps, and when he did, people loved it. Not much more I can say about the manager behind the Horsemen, but JJ is a 4. Fun fact, he also managed the Extreme Horsemen over in MLW.
Really?
Yep, we'll get to them at a later time.
You want to do a Tully now? He's been sitting down here for a while.
That caps off my fours.
I'll put him at the end here. So Tully's a 4.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting if you look at the 4. You've got the group that most people recognize as the Horsemen. I mean, especially Starcast is going to have them all down there. There's going to be meet and greets, a Four Horsemen panel. Then you got Benoit up there. I mean, some people might disagree with me. I know Jordy and Grace recently went on Twitter and said that Benoit couldn't hang with nowadays wrestlers because he'd forget all the moves and that he can burn in hell. But I mean, on this tier list, Benoit's not in hell. He's at the top. And I mean, Tully's a 4 for the same reason that Arn is. I mean, he's an original. I think Tully cut a better promo than Rick. I think that Tully could out wrestle any of them. Tully was actually supposed to come back. It was late 80s, early 90s to rejoin the Four Horsemen. When they were gonna reunite, they found coke in his system. So, and that's when they were leaving the WWF to come back to WCW. So that put an end to that, and that was really the last time, except for one of the Slamborees, that people saw Tully until AEW. AEW, he took the Horseman name and he formed the Pinnacle. It's looking a little lopsided there. A whole lot of 4s.
This is a very top-heavy tier list.
I mean, that's what happens when you're the greatest faction of all time.
You think they're better than the Bullet Club?
I think the Bullet Club would have quite a few 0s and 1s.
Oof. What about good old Ole Anderson here? Is he a 0 or a 1?
Ole is a 3.
Ole is a 3. I thought so.
I mean, Ole I think what held him back at the time of being a Horseman was his age. I mean, he was a lot older than the others. He had a lot more career behind him. That's why I said he kind of got kicked out for Luger. The story went he wanted to go watch his son wrestle, so he wasn't there with the Horsemen, so they kicked him out. They brought him back a couple times to be the manager role. It was never really the same. Ole now has a lot of grudges, especially with Rick. Most famously after the Horsemen, he was the voice of the Shockmaster. But I mean, Ole Anderson at 3, he's a good Horseman. He's just not great.
He didn't shock the world.
Nope.
Okay. What about he's cut off here. We didn't realize who he was at first. What about Jeff Jarrett? Good old Slapnuts.
He gets a 2.
Jeff Jarrett's a 2.
And I know this is controversial again. Conrad Thompson always says Jeff Jarrett wasn't in the Four Horsemen. A little tongue-in-cheek there. Jeff Jarrett was a member, if I'm not mistaken. They did a whole storyline about bringing him in, whether he was going to be in the NWO or the Horsemen. The big thing that changed how the Horsemen looked is Jarrett was literally allowed to walk away when he left the Four Horsemen. Normally you get kicked out, but he was just able to leave. And when leaving the Horsemen, he took the U.S. title and Mongo's wife. And the reason that people say he's not a Horseman is because Arn Anderson said in his biography that Jeff Jarrett was never a Horseman. His membership and his easy departure leave this situation ambiguous. They were going to make him a Horseman. This is one of those times, I referenced it in our last Ric Flair one, that Ric Flair was called old a lot. They were trying to force him out. I secretly think they were gonna have Jeff Jarrett try and take over the Horseman. I mean, he had the look, he had the blonde hair, he did the strut, he did the figure four. He just didn't like how WCW was going because of the NWO, and he jumped ship back to WWF. So that's why I've got Jeff Jarrett where he's at. I mean, could have been better, could have been worse. No complaints for me.
I think the next one we should cover here also has his head cut off. Here is Kurt Hennig.
Now Henning's also a 2. Again, not due to his wrestling skills or anything. He was there. He was a horseman for a cup of coffee as well. He was the last true new member. Well, I take that back. Malenko and Flair were, but he was the last one that got a big grand entrance. That's Arn Anderson gave him his spot, and Hennig turned on the Horsemen of the War Games to join the NWO. I think 10 years prior, Hennig would have been a perfect Four Horseman with his technical ability, his promo skills, his look. I mean, he had it all. But because the NWO was the hot thing, they had to find a way to screw the Horsemen over. Let's have Hennig leave. Down to 2, I see.
Down to 2, the last 2. Let's do Dean Malenko first. Where's the good old
I've got Dean Malenko at 3. Which it's interesting there. I mean, 4 has a little more, but 4 could almost be a Four Horseman group. 3, we just completed a 4. 2 has a 4 completed. I've got Malenko at 3. He was really the last member with longevity. It's interesting because I've talked about having the WCW tapes. Threw me off because on one of them, he teamed with Jeff Jarrett while Jeff Jarrett was deciding if he was going to be a Horseman, and they fought Benoit and Steve McMichael. So I was just all sorts of confused because on one of the games they were all Horsemen. So I didn't know what was going on. But
poor Logan was confused.
Yeah, he was called the Iceman for a reason. He went in there, he kicked ass, cruiserweight champion, TV champion. He was a tag team champion with Chris Benoit. I believe that's the last titles that the Horsemen ever had. Again, had he been with the group when the group was respected, I believe the sky was the limit for Mr. Malenko. ECW had a group called the Triple Threat, which was loosely inspired by the Four Horsemen and how much Shane Douglas hated them. He was in it with Benoit. The Benoit-Malenko tandem is like the diet version of the Brainbusters of Arn and Tully. Dean's another one of those. When you describe a horseman, his wrestling ability is it, but he's lacking a little bit in the charisma department, which is fine because not every horseman needs charisma, but if you want to break into that 4 tier, you need a little bit of that horseman dust.
Now, our last horseman here, does he have
Paul Roma sucks.
He has no...
Paul Roma is absolute trash.
He has no horseman dust.
No, he is a 0. You want to talk about a corporate horseman? I believe... Let me see my facts before I'm wrong here. Yeah, when they were going to bring Tully back, and they couldn't, Paul Roma was inserted as a horseman. They chose Paul Roma, in my opinion. If you look at him and you look at Tully, they look the same. They had some of the same moves. I mean, some basic move set, like suplexes, DDTs. I think this was an instance of them trying to trick fans into being like, hey, look, get your Four Horsemen. But Paul, yeah, ass tier, exactly. He is awful. And he's gone on record and trying to say that the Four Horsemen was just like a glory project for those involved because they were just old and past their prime. Right. That's why they each had titles at a time when titles were voted on by committees. He never got a title. Triple H said it best in the Four Horsemen documentary. While watching WCW and seeing Paul Roma walk out as a new Horseman, the job guy from the WWF is now in the best stable in the NWA. Like, Paul Roma is zero. He's a zero tier for wrestling.
Is he an ass tier for wrestling too?
Yeah. All he's good for is getting in tag teams with stupid names. He was in the Young Stallions. He was in Power and Glory, and he's in Pretty Wonderful. I can't stand the man. And to, like I said, to mock the Horseman, the one thing that you're known for, whether it's infamous or not. There's always a blemish. I mean, NWO had Disco Inferno. The Bullet Club has Fat Ass Massa. And the Horsemen had Paul Roma.
I might have to retitle this video Logan buries Paul Roma. Logan shoots on Paul Roma.
He's not good. Is as basic and vanilla as you can get. Every one of his tag partners was better than him. He can't do shit. I want to see him talk the kind of shit that he does to Arn Anderson now. Watch Arn pull a Glock on him.
Let's do it at StarCast.
I just can't stand him. And for all the people out there who liked Power and Glory, good for you. Right, that was a time when WWE would just throw two mid-card job guys together and see if it worked. This time it was Paul Roma and poor Hercules Hernandez. I mean, Paul Roma's trash. But let's not let Paul Roma ruin the fact that there's a lot better high-tier horsemen here than low-tier.
This is a very top, like I said before, it's top-heavy tier list
Yeah,
you have here, Logan.
I'm biased, but I mean, you'll hear people shit on Sting or Kurt Hennig or Jarrett because they were barely in it. But I mean, you remember them for being a horseman. You remember that moment in time. And like I said, Sid Vicious, I remember the War Games picture where it's Rick, Arn, Sid, and Barry. Then you can't leave Lex and Pillman out. Malenko's definitely a 3. Ole's up there. I mean, and it's just amazing the amount of talent in this group. Like I said, how, because of injuries, misfortune like Tully and his coke, bad booking like Hennig getting taken out so fast. I think there's James Horseman could still, in a way, be around today. I mean, I still have hope. I remember when AEW started, my hope was to get Pillman Jr., Tessa, and FTR and have it be the new Horseman. Well, Tessa's kind of fallen out of good graces. But I mean, there's still Brock Anderson.
Yeah.
To have Anderson, Pillman, and then FTR. And you got yourself a Horseman group. I don't know, though. Do you all out there agree with my tier list? Do any of you actually defend Paul Roma?
Do they have the courage to go in the comments and defend Paul Roma?
I know people.
Logan's gonna be checking every day just to make sure.
I know people are gonna hate that I put Paul Roma below David Flair and even below Mongo, and I know people are gonna hate that I put Benoit on the same tier as the others. But I mean, before his incident, Rick and Arn both said that Benoit was what a horseman should be. And I mean, if Rick and Arn are the flag bearers, and they say that about you, let's put it into football terms. We're here in Michigan.
We are.
If Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson both said, this person here is a Detroit Lion, then they're one of the top Lions. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Do they want to be a Detroit Lion though? That's.
I mean, they might not want to be,
I think people
but
want
they
to be a
are.
horseman. People don't want to be a lion.
But I mean, yeah. Let me know what you think about this. Do you think someone should be higher, lower? Let us know.
Yeah, let us know in the comments and make sure you what's those thing that thing all the YouTubers say, like, comment, and subscribe. Uh,
Yeah,
no,
let us know if you like this kind of video. We're trying to figure out what you YouTube people like.
yeah. Now the link to this will also be in the description if you want to make your own tier list and send it over to us on Twitter at PW Proverbs. We also have
I
a.
just realized it looks like an F.
Oh, hey, yeah. There'll also be a link to our link tree that has a link to all of our social medias, including our podcast. So if you're only subscribed to us on YouTube and just check out our videos that we upload once every couple months or so, I'll hopefully get better on that. But we
Give
do
us a play button.
we do have a podcast that gets regularly updated weekly, new episodes every week. So make sure you go check that out. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, I think. Whatever dumb Android ones are out there, I don't know. It's available on all of them. So make sure you go check that out.